Where does Penn State football rank in the Big Ten going into next season? Well, let's put it this way. There's not that many other teams in front of them right now.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily Penn State Nittany Lions podcast. I'm your host, Zach Seyko, and we are a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers join today, and you'll get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more is a winner. All you got to do is visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. We welcome back special guest Jason Lord, former talk show host and producer over at ESPN Radio State College when it was in its existence, and a great coworker, great companion over there at the radio station. You can keep up with Jason on X, formerly known as Twitter. And if you're not already, become an everyday or subscribe to Locked On Nittany Lions on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts for the latest conversations around your favorite Penn State sports teams. Where does Penn State rank in the Big Ten? Is the college football playoff expansion good for the Nittany Lions? And this is all going to be a good news for Penn State because of one particular detail. Drew Aller. Jason, I watched, there's Menace to Sports. Some people might remember the former Ohio State wide receivers coach, Zach Smith, actually runs the show. He's the main host, and it's Ohio State focused, but he talks about Big Ten football. And he had a recent show where he talked about Penn State specifically, saying that they were a dangerous team in 2024, and this is going to set up where we think they belong in the Big Ten. But he says, according to Zach Smith of the show, Menace to Sports, Penn State is all in on Drew Aller. He said that the staff, the Penn State staff, and I quote, messaged him recently saying that Drew Aller has taken a next step. He's generational, and that's going to be what sets apart Penn State from everybody else in the Big Ten Conference if they are going to do that. So with respect to what Zach Smith is saying as a former Division I football coach with connections all across the NCAA, I believe him when he says that, when he's in contact with these people. I would put Penn State at third in the Big Ten right now. Ohio State, because Penn State, yes, they got Julian Fleming out of the transfer portal, Nolan Rucci, but it's not exactly Caleb Downs out of the transfer portal and retaining a lot of other first-round talent. Now, if someone like Chop Robinson or Adisa Isaac had come back for another season, hypothetically, then it's a little different, but you're losing those playmakers that Ohio State is retaining. And then with respect to Oregon coming in, Oregon just has too much talent on paper. They have, I guess, a problem at quarterback because Dylan Gabriel comes in. Dante Moore also comes in. So they have a really loaded powerhouse at offense, but Penn State, and it's not a distant third. Again, we're assuming that the potential of Drew Aller is real here from what we've seen, even though there were some speed bumps along the way in his first season starting. But I would have Penn State as the third best team in the Big Ten right now heading into spring football.
Yeah, right where I am. I think they'll probably be third right behind the two teams you said. Ohio State right now with the offseason they had, not only because of the portal, because of the fact they kept everybody they kept. I think, to me, they are clear-cut the number one favorite right now to win the Big Ten. I think they're a favorite to win the national championship. They're in the top 2 or 3 there. So very clearly Ohio State number one. And Oregon I would put at number 2. I'm a little higher on Gabriel than you are, I think. I think Gabriel's a pretty good quarterback. I think he's got the chance to really shine. I think he's better coached at Oregon without question. We'll see. As you said, they bring another transfer in too. But I feel like Gabriel's probably has the job, and I think it's going to be him running the offense. You saw the improvements repeatedly in that system with what Bo Nix was able to do. I think he saw a lot of good flashes at Auburn, but you didn't really see what he was completely capable of doing. He came to Oregon, and he was a Heisman Trophy candidate. So very clearly, I think Gabriel's going to be better at Oregon. I think he's a proven quarterback that can get better, and I think he will at Oregon. I think they're a more complete team than Penn State is right now as you're looking at it. And is their schedule going to get a little tougher? I think probably as you get into the Big Ten, but I still would probably put Penn State third. I agree with you. I don't think they're a distant third by any means, but the other part of it is I put them third because I think they're a little bit better than the teams that have taken a further step back. I think Penn State's taken a little bit of a step back so far, but I think right now Michigan, Washington, USC have all taken a step back. USC is going to have very little time to overhaul that defense, which they're going to have to do.
Yeah.
They're going to have a tough schedule early on, and they have probably one of the toughest schedules in the conference coming here, without a doubt. But now for Washington, obviously everything they lost, they're going to take a step back. Michigan, same thing. You lose your coach. I don't really care.
All those senior leaders.
Exactly. Everything just falls apart when you lose a coach sometimes. I'm not saying Michigan's going to be a disaster. I think they still win 8 or 9 games. But, yeah, you lose that leadership. You lose, obviously, McCarthy. You lose Corum. Edwards, I think, will be back. But it's very difficult to lose that kind of star power and really stay where you are, being the defending national champion now. We'll see where it stands to come 3 years from now. But I think, to me, Michigan took a further step back. Washington took a further step back. And those other teams, I think, are still 6-6, 7, and maybe 7-5, like the Wisconsins of the world. I think Rutgers maybe wins 8 games. But I think, to me, those teams are probably in that middle of the pack as they've always been. So I think 3 is a good spot. And to your point with Aller, it's going to be a first year, obviously, with a full offensive coordinator post Yurcich. So we'll see really what'll happen there. Can he get better? I think another part of it, though, will be, Zach, wide receiver again. Can these guys get separation? Can there be a proven number 1 there and a proven number 2, which there was, you had the number 1 with Lambert Smith. You just never found a number 2 last year. You really didn't. And I think that hurt Drew Aller's numbers a lot. Aller had some growing pains too. And we'll see.
It's difficult because how can you trust your wide receivers when they're not getting open?
Absolutely not. I agree with you.
As a true sophomore first-year starter, he had 1 interception going into the Peach Bowl, right? That's I think that's a statistic that isn't talked about enough. It's not like he had talked about enough. If he had a Marvin Harrison Jr., that offense is completely different. And then I guess that's good news for a Mike Yurcich type. But you bring up, so let me play off of the point you made about Bo Nix. Bo Nix at Auburn struggles, and we see how much coaching matters, right?
Absolutely.
Goes to Oregon and becomes a completely different player, and now is in a first-round pick conversation. I personally wouldn't select him there, but maybe a general manager might, and scouts see something different. But Bo Nix goes to Oregon, Jason, and he is a completely different quarterback. Andy Kotelnicki comes to Happy Valley. What does that mean? What does that mean for Drew Aller?
Sure, and he could improve dramatically. I don't think there's any doubt. You still have that great running game, which is going to help a quarterback no matter who he is. And you have one of the best in the country when you have Allen and Singleton there. So it'll be hard to say. I think it'll be interesting. We'll see the next step he takes. And I think you saw some of it towards the end of last year, but then that bowl game, you had all those opt-outs. You couldn't really get a good read on the team as a whole. And unfortunately, at the end of the year, they played Michigan State, where they looked great. But the problem is they looked great against the team. Exactly. Looked great against a team that was absolutely terrible, that just could not wait to throw in the towel at the end of the year. So you really didn't get a great read on what they are. And we'll see. I think Penn State will be, they'll have a little bit of a test, I think, early on in Morgantown. We'll see. Obviously, they're the better team going into that game, but I think those fans are going to be up for that game no matter what time of day that game is going to be, no matter what day it's played. I think they're going to be fired up and ready to go. So it's going to be interesting to see the step he takes. But, you look at Aller, I think he can improve without a doubt, but it just comes down to those question marks again that you had last year. Wide receiver, offensive line's not going to be the same with Olu not there. It'll be still experienced, still have some good players, but I think the line will take a little bit of a step back. So we'll see. I think we find out a little bit early on, though, right away when you have that first game on the road.
We'll stick with this idea going into the second segment before we talk about the college football playoff expansion specifically in regards to Penn State. But you bring up that this team's taking a step back. I want to address that a little closer, Jason, as we continue here on Locked On Nittany Lions. Today's episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. It's what brings home the winning trophy, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors is everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to its peak performance. From superchargers to roof racks to exhaust kits, LED headlights, and so much more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. And with over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into that MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. That is ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. The Locked On Podcast Network is making history. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now you can find it on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus the national shows covering each and every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube, and now you can find it in the free Fire TV channels app. Let us know down in the comments. Be a part of the discussion. Where do you rank Penn State in the Big Ten? Where do you think could they make the expanded college football playoff going into next season? With the regard, Jason, that you think that they've taken a step back.
A slight.
It depends how you look at it, though. Let's take, because overall, I mean, comparing it to last year, we're comparing last year's team to this year's team.
Right.
You upgrade with Andy Kotelnicki at offensive coordinator. Tom Allen doesn't. That's in terms of coordinator. Yes, my preference is Manny Diaz because the system has been in place, but it's not like Tom Allen is far. He needs to focus on defense for the first time. But you look at the roster, defense in terms of depth and talent takes a step back because there's a lot of unknown. It's a lot of unknown. Exactly. But the offense, exactly where I'm looking at it. The offense, Andy Kotelnicki now leading that. You get Drew, another year of Drew Aller, another year of Nicholas Singleton, another year of Katron Allen, another year of Tyler Warren. You get Julian Fleming out of the transfer portal for, at the end of the day, if Fleming doesn't wow you with 70 catches, 800 yards, somewhere in the neighborhood of 7-8 touchdowns. Okay, that's lofty expectations for him as a receiver, but I like him as a block. I love him as a blocker. Actually, the reason Penn State's running game couldn't get going, aside from the fact that the passing game was abysmal, was the fact that wide receivers could not block. Julian Fleming was the second best graded run blocker on the Ohio State team, and that's with respect to the offensive linemen. So all those things complement one another. You'll get more play action. You'll get better scheming. So Penn State isn't going to play this. They're going to try. They're going to play smothering defense, at least try to. But you're going to get more cases where Penn State football games are going to be a lot more exciting. You're not going to get this, back and forth, running the ball 30-plus times against Michigan, and then the score's really low. Penn State's going to get into shootouts with teams next season because of the offense taking that much of a step forward. You hope so. I think that you want that offense to take that kind of a step forward, but there's still the unknown. And I think that's why I say, look, when I say step back, I don't mean 10-2 to 8-4 or 7-5 here. I mean 10-2 to 10-2, 9-3. It may be 9-3 at worst. I think the schedule favors them a lot. I'm not sure they lose 3 games. So I think for me, the unknown on defense, the bright side of it, when this team has had unknown, it's when they seem to thrive. They had the unknown the year they went undefeated and lost to Minnesota in 8th, 9th game of the year. So when the unknown is there, it seems like they thrive a lot more. And the expectations are there, it seems like they don't thrive. So we'll see. That's been the history under James Franklin, it seems like, in these last several years. Under Coach Franklin, 10-2, absolutely. But I think the defense is not a concern because there's a lot of depth there. And secondary, you're replacing a lot of guys. Defensively, you're going to replace a lot of first-round picks. And I think linebacker, you're going to need to see some improvement out of some guys. So I think ultimately, to me, when I'm looking at it, and look, I'm not talking about Abdul Carter when I say you need to see some improvement out of guys. But I think, to me, there's unknowns on that defense where I think, look, you have the whole spring to get better, and I think this team will.
But when I say step back, I'm saying ever so slight step back compared to the rest of the Big Ten. Michigan, I think, took a significant step back. Washington, I think, took a significant step back. Wisconsin, I think, it's so hard to read. Iowa,
I'd like to think they're better. I'd like to think Wisconsin's better, and that one is going to be, I would say, other than Ohio State, if you're looking for your second toughest game on the schedule, it's going on the road after USC and Wisconsin are a 2A, 2B, because it's not you have the bye week there, but it's the fact that you go to Southern Cal, bye week, and then you're back on the road against an improved Wisconsin team.
Yeah. The other part is the UCLA game. UCLA, I think, is going to win maybe 6 games at most. I feel like, even with Eric Bieniemy there. But
they made the right decisions. They made good decisions.
Yeah, they did. Yeah, they make great decisions. They're absolutely great decisions. But
I'll still take a step back.
Yeah, there are. Yeah, you lose Chip Kelly, obviously. I think that's going to hurt. And the other part of it is the only concern for me for Penn State, getting into that last home game of the stretch is going to be that UCLA game. So we'll see. That ends up being the whiteout. I don't think everything I'm saying right now, you might as well just silence. I think that if that becomes the whiteout, you're not going to be concerned whatsoever about it. But I think when you have that last home game of 4 in a row, not necessarily 4 straight weeks, they have a bye week in there, but 4 straight home games. So that's a little bit of a concern. Look, I'm not saying Penn State's going to lose that game. I think Penn State's far superior to UCLA, but that game is always an interesting game because it's right on that stretch of the cusp of you're making that road trip to USC the following week. And so that one's going to be interesting. But, yeah, it's a schedule that I think is favorable. But the second toughest game is a good question. I think Wisconsin is probably in the conversation. Ohio State obviously is going to be that toughest game at home the following week, November 2nd, without a doubt. But, it'll be an interesting spring practice as we get set to look at it here coming very shortly here. Starting March 12th, we start to see really what Penn State has. And, even my comment, the slight step back becomes significant step forward by the end of that week. So, who knows? But I think there is a little bit of unknown on this team. You talk about, I just want to touch quickly on Fleming. I think he's a guy that you feel like the sky's the limit because he hasn't shown anything at Ohio State, and part of that
he was never asked to. He's never asked to be that guy.
You took the words right out of my mouth. Part of that was he was never asked to be that number 1 guy, and part of it also was that he had just bigger talent ahead of him. I would not confuse Julian Fleming with Marvin Harrison. I'm not going to confuse him even with Garrett Wilson. I think these are guys that just were better, but it's going to be interesting to see. What Fleming is able to do. He is a great blocker. The other part of his aspect, and I know a lot of Penn State fans are going to say, hey, he caused the turnover doing this, but I think on special teams, he's pretty good too. And that's going to be another aspect to his game that he brings here to Happy Valley too. I know he had the turnover in the Ohio State-Penn State game, but I think to me, he brings a lot of interesting aspects, and it's a wide receiving core again. They couldn't get separation last year. They need all the help they can need coming into this season.
The college football playoff expands to 12 teams, and they're looking to expand it even further. So Penn State, is this a benefit for them? Does it take away from what they can do in the schedule? Let's discuss that on the other side of this break here on Locked On Nittany Lions. Today's episode is also brought to you by FanDuel, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet simply wins. Bet on all your favorite NBA players, your favorite NBA teams with things like quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and so much more. You can combine all those bets that you like into one bet with a parlay with boosted odds and boosted winnings. All you got to do is visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA. And remember, if you're not already, become an everydayer. Subscribe to Locked On Nittany Lions on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts for the latest conversations around your favorite Penn State sports teams. In this final segment, we'll wrap up with the expanded college football playoff, which they're looking to expand even further. But for the start, it's that 5-7 format, right? They have the conference champions, the top four teams, and then it basically, and Notre Dame loses out on this too, Jason. The fact that they're not in a conference, they're never going to be higher than the 5th seed. But the way it works, the first four
join
seeds,
a conference and share that money then.
Yeah. No, really, they should. No, this really does put them in a position to join a conference. But those first 4 teams, they're the best teams in college football. If you know, and you have to win, you have to be in a conference too. And then the rest of them, 5 through 12, are all going to be at larges. And then you have that one group of 5 school that does get in the playoff as well. And they're already looking to expand. I'm all for it. I'm all for them expanding the college football playoff if and when they do to decide that, because FCS, Division II, Division III have all done 2014 playoffs. So why can't why can't college football do that as well? It's more college football, so that's what I would be excited for. For Penn State, this is obviously a benefit. It's obviously a benefit because outside of 2018, when they lost to Kentucky in the Citrus Bowl, and outside of 2020 and 2021, they would have made the expanded college football playoff how many times? And they missed out on a couple of 14 college football playoffs twice. They missed out in 2016 and they missed out in 2017. So Penn State has been so close. They've been ever so close. And if it wasn't for Ohio State and Michigan, or if they played in the Big Ten West, Penn State would have been in a much better position to make those college football playoffs before. So if they were already near and around the 4-team spot and finishing inside of the top 10, top 8, I mean, Penn State would have hosted multiple playoff games. That's the thing. The 5 through 8 seeds all get to host an opening round playoff game. A playoff atmosphere, Beaver Stadium playoff game in the middle of, as the seasons change, getting closer to winter.
They say towards the end of December. Yeah.
And you have to play an SEC team that's, used to, let's just take Auburn. Let's say Auburn's on the upswing. They're in the top 12. Well, Penn State welcomes Auburn back into Beaver Stadium this time with a much different environment in terms of weather, and then with the playoff on the line. So if you think Beaver Stadium is loud, I imagine that this will be a whiteout too in a college football playoff home game. But maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, Jason, with we're assuming that they make the college football playoff in 2024. Do you have and I think they can host a home game. I really think they can host a home game in 24 as well.
Yeah, I think it's very possible. There's no question about it. I think there are a few teams to me in college football that benefit more than Penn State with this 12-team playoff. This is a spot where they're almost perfect. And I would make the argument almost perfect in the sense of that matchup in the bowl game. I think Ole Miss is in a great spot too, where they could have been a playoff team too. So when you're in that spot that's borderline, between 10 and 12, this is absolutely perfect. It benefits you significantly. As far as the weather goes, yes and no. I feel like at times the weather is a little bit of an overrated aspect. I think these players at some point in their careers have played in cold weather. So and even you talk about USC. USC played in Oregon. They played in Washington. So, they're used to the Southern California weather, but okay. And I'm not saying USC is going to make the playoff.
Miami of Florida struggles with it. Miami of Florida doesn't like playing in those winter bowl games.
But I just feel like, I don't know. It's kind of like that November night game rule. I just feel like it's I agree. Does the weather play a factor? Most certainly, but I just feel like it doesn't play as much of a factor as you think it does. That's where, look, the 49ers went in and beat the Packers in sub-zero weather how many years ago in the playoffs. And that's a team from California beating a team that's used to the cold weather. So it's not, I don't know. I agree with you that it's a factor, but I also feel like the bigger factor is who's the better team on the field. That's to me, when you look at it with what's going on. But yeah, college football, I think it helps significantly. The expansion helps Penn State a lot. It's interesting, Zach, that they're starting to talk about 14 and 16 teams, which, look, I'm all for it. If you want to expand it to 14 and 16, I'm fine with it. Now that we're at 12, where it'll be interesting to see. But you haven't played a season yet with 12, so you really don't know how it's working yet. Mm-hmm. And that's what makes it even more interesting that they're thinking about expanding it so soon. But Yeah, I think it's great for a lot of colleges. How far into January do you play? I think is going to be the interesting part of it, the aspect of it that I'm
Mhm.
not sure of. Or is it just going to be a simple part where, hey, are less teams going to get that first bye, or are more teams going to get that
Yep.
first bye? You just don't know. But I think it's probably a kind of a wait and see to see what this 12-team playoff does. But I'm very happy with the expansion from the outside looking in. I think it's you're right, benefits Penn State significantly. And there's so many teams in these 4-team playoffs that have been left out that you feel like probably could have won a national championship. So that's where I think it's going to help a lot. And look, there'll be teams left out of the 12 where you think, hey, they could have done some damage, but it's a start in the right direction with a 12-team playoff.
Well, and now this is the last thing I want to bring up as we finish up the show, Jason, is the fact that the goalposts now move because Penn State, wow, they've made a New Year's Six bowl how many times under James Franklin? They've won, they've won almost all of them. They're missing the Peach Bowl under James Franklin, but in this case, getting to the college football playoffs, sneaking in as an 11 or 12 seed, I guess doesn't do enough for me. You still have to get into the semi. You have to make it to the next round. So hosting and there's potential. I'm not saying that Penn State they're still on the outside looking in when it comes to the top 4. But personally, here's what I'm saying. As much as a first round bye would be nice, as great as that would be, I personally want Penn State to finish in the 5 through 8 seed so that they have to host the playoff game so that you get that playoff atmosphere, because we don't know what's going to happen with the college football playoff in years to come, whether they go all neutral fields, especially if they 14, 16, 24 teams. What's that going to look like? They'll probably still use home field advantage, but we don't know for sure.
I don't.
But my point is that I want to see Penn State before we know what's next. I want to see Penn State host a Beaver Stadium playoff atmosphere type of game, win, and then move to the semifinals. Because if they lose in the first round, Jason, what's the difference? What's the difference?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think if you get to the first round, you lose, then that expectation is about the same. I think the expectation's high, but the result is about the same. You're right. Now I think, but as far as first round hosting, I think that's going to be permanent. I don't see that going away, Zach. I think
especially if you go to like 24 teams, you have to.
You have to. Yeah, absolutely, you have to. But it's interesting to see. I think you want them to be in the top 8. You want them to host. But I think most importantly, even if they're number 12, being the last team that backs in, you want them to win that first playoff game. I think that's a big part of it. No matter where you do it on the road, you do it at home, you want them to win that first game.
They have to get to the next round. They have to.
Yeah, that's a step in the right direction. That's a step to where this program goes, and it gets forward in that way. But look, again, I think this 12-team playoff is designed, obviously, to get more teams into the playoffs. Obviously, we're ignoring the fact that it's for more money. Of course, it's for more money. I think there's no question that. But it's great. Absolutely, it's great for the fans, without a doubt. But this again benefits Penn State in a huge way. It benefits those 8 through 12 teams in a massive way, and they're one of the teams that I think benefits the most from it. So you got to take advantage of it, absolutely. And it's going to be fun. It's going to be a fun season. I think it's going to be fun in 2 ways, Zach. I think fun, obviously, because the playoff expands, but now the Big Ten East and West is gone too. So now you're going to have
the 2 best teams in the conference.
You're going to have the 2 best teams in the Big Ten playing each other in the Big Ten championship game. It's going to hurt some coaches, I think, out West a little bit, just because suddenly you're not finishing second in the Big Ten West. You're finishing 8th in the Big Ten. That job security is going to be a little iffy in a few places in the Big Ten, I think. But from a fan's perspective, I think this is going to be an exciting year of college football. I'm really looking forward to it. We're only, about 12, 13 days away from spring practice starting. I'm very ready for it, very much looking forward to it, and to see not only what Penn State has as a team, but also see what everybody else has. And as good as Ohio State looks on paper, let's see how they end up being on the field.
He's Jason Lord, former ESPN Radio State College co-host, analyst, producer, and you can keep up with him on X, formerly known as Twitter, for more takes on college football, Penn State, and so much more. If you're not already, become an everydayer. Subscribe to Locked On Nittany Lions on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Let us know your thoughts in the comments section about the Big Ten rankings. going into his Penn State's third, in our opinion. What's yours? And what do you think about the college football playoff expansion? Jason, thanks so much for the time. Thanks for chatting Penn State football once again, and can't wait the next time we get to have this conversation.
Absolutely, Zach. Anytime. Thanks so much for having me.